There are people who ignore you by accident, and then there are people who do it with precision. Chloe, my mom's best friend, belonged to the second group. She was warm with everyone, laughing easily with my mom, remembering details about strangers, asking the right questions at the right time. But whenever I entered the room, something shifted. Her voice softened. Her eyes moved away. It was as if acknowledging me would break an unspoken rule. I was 24, living back in my mom's house for reasons I didn't like to explain. I told myself Chloe's distance meant nothing, that adults are complicated, that some people simply don't click. Still, it was impossible not to notice how deliberate her absence felt. She didn't just overlook me, she avoided me. And avoidance has a weight of its own. The house itself seemed to notice. Long dinners stretched into silence. Hallways felt narrower. I began to sense her before I saw her, the way you sense a storm before the sky changes. There was tension in the air, undefined and uncomfortable, and I couldn't tell whether it came from her, from me, or from something neither of us wanted to name. What unsettled me most wasn't her silence. It was the moments when that silence almost cracked. A breath held too long. A glance that started and stopped. The feeling that something was being actively restrained. I didn't know why Chloe kept me at a distance, but I knew it wasn't indifference. At the time, I still believed some boundaries were unbreakable, that certain lines existed for a reason. I had no idea how fragile those assumptions were, or how quickly everything I thought was stable would begin to shift. If you enjoy emotionally intense, realistic stories, subscribe to the channel. And comment below. What do you think happens next between Emily and Chloe? Also tell us the city and country you're watching from. Chloe came back into our lives on an ordinary Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. No announcement, no build-up. My mom mentioned her name casually while pouring coffee, as if she were talking about the weather. "Chloe's staying with us for a bit," she said. "Just until things settle." I nodded like it didn't matter, like my chest hadn't tightened at the sound of that name. She arrived that evening with a single suitcase and the same composed energy I remembered from years before. Chloe didn't rush. She never did. She moved through the doorway with calm assurance, hugged my mom first, laughed softly at something familiar between them. When her eyes flicked in my direction, the smile paused, barely, but enough for me to notice. She acknowledged me with a polite nod. Nothing more. I told myself that was normal. We weren't close. She was my mom's friend, not mine. Still, there was something deliberate in the way she kept her distance, like she was aware of every step she took around me. At dinner, she sat across from my mom, angled away from me. She asked about work, about mutual friends, about things that had nothing to do with the room we all shared. The house felt different with her in it. Smaller, quieter. I became hyper-aware of routines, who used the bathroom when, how long footsteps lingered in the hallway, the sound of her suitcase wheels earlier that day echoing in my head. Chloe took the guest room at the end of the hall, far from mine. I noticed. I told myself it was practical. Over the next few days, I learned her rhythms again. Morning runs before sunrise. Coffee black, no sugar. Phone calls taken outside, voice low and controlled. She was careful, contained. The kind of woman who always seemed to know where she stood, except when it came to me. Around me, her certainty thinned. Our conversations were brief and functional. "Hi." "Morning." "Sorry, didn't see you there." Once, our hands brushed when we reached for the same mug. She pulled back instantly, fingers curling as if she'd touched something warm. "Sorry," she said too quickly. I watched her retreat to the sink, shoulders tight. At night, I lay awake listening to the house settle. The creak of old wood, the hum of the refrigerator. Sometimes footsteps, hers, moving quietly down the hall. I wondered if she slept as lightly as I did, if she also replayed moments that meant nothing and everything at the same time. My mom seemed happy to have her there. Lighter, less alone. I noticed how Chloe listened to her with full attention, how she anticipated her needs without being asked. Their bond was effortless, built over years I hadn't been part of. I respected that. I didn't want to complicate it. I promised myself I wouldn't. But promises are easy when they're abstract, harder when they live under the same roof. One afternoon, I found Chloe in the kitchen, standing by the window, sunlight cutting across her face. She looked older than I remembered, not in a bad way, just more real. She turned when she heard me and for once didn't look away immediately. Our eyes met, held. The moment stretched, fragile and unguarded. Then she broke it. "Your mom's not back yet," she said, as if that explained something. I nodded, past her, felt the space she left behind like a held breath. That night I admitted something to myself I hadn't before. Whatever was happening between Chloe and me wasn't new. It was something paused, deferred. And now, with no warning, it was awake again. The first real shift didn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happened in the space left behind when my mom wasn't home. She had gone out early that Saturday morning, leaving a note on the counter about errands and a late lunch with friends. The house felt suspended in her absence, quieter than usual, like it was waiting for something to happen. I told myself I wouldn't overthink it, that Chloe and I were just two adults sharing space. Nothing more. Chloe was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, wearing running shorts and a loose gray hoodie, her hair still damp from the shower. She looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen all week, less guarded. She poured coffee, set a mug on the counter, then hesitated, her hand hovering, before sliding it toward me without looking up. "Didn't know how you'd take it," she said. "Black's fine." She nodded, like she'd expected that answer. We stood there longer than necessary, the quiet stretching between us. Outside, the morning was cool and bright, the kind of early light that makes everything feel exposed. I leaned against the counter. Chloe rested her hip on the opposite side, close enough that I could smell her shampoo, clean, faintly citrus. Too close to ignore. "So," she said, clearing her throat, "how long are you staying?" The question landed heavier than it should have. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "As long as I need to, I guess." She glanced at me then, really looked. Her eyes softened, just slightly. "Yeah," she said, "that makes sense." Something in her tone suggested she understood more than I'd said. As the morning stretched on, we moved around each other carefully, folding laundry, wiping counters that were already clean. Every time our paths crossed, there was a subtle recalibration, an unconscious awareness of space and distance. When she passed behind me, she paused, waiting for me to move first. I didn't. The air tightened, then she stepped back, careful again. I felt it then, the pull. Not sudden, not explosive, just present. Like gravity you only notice once you stop fighting it. At one point, Chloe reached up to a high cabinet and sighed in frustration when she couldn't quite reach what she wanted. I stepped closer without thinking, took the jar down easily, handed it to her. Our fingers brushed. This time she didn't pull away immediately. "Thanks," she said quietly. "Anytime." Our eyes met again, longer than before. I saw something flicker there. Uncertainty, restraint, something unfinished. She inhaled slowly, then turned away, breaking the moment before it could become anything else. "I should go," she said, suddenly brisk. "I've got a call to make." She left the kitchen, leaving behind the faint warmth of her presence and the unmistakable sense that something had shifted. Just enough to be dangerous. The rest of the day passed uneasily. When my mom came home, laughing about her lunch, everything snapped back into place on the surface. Dinner was normal. Conversation flowed. Chloe was attentive, composed, distant again. If I hadn't been there that morning, I might have believed nothing had changed. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the look in her eyes. The way she'd stayed still when she could have stepped back. The way silence between us now felt intentional, loaded. I understood then that this wasn't about attraction alone. It was about choice. About how long you can pretend something doesn't exist before it starts demanding to be acknowledged. And for the first time, I wondered who would be the one to break first. It happened late, the way most turning points do. Quietly, when no one is watching. I had gone downstairs for water, half asleep. The house dark except for the soft glow of the kitchen light. I hadn't expected to find Chloe there, sitting at the table with her laptop closed, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She looked up when she heard me, surprise flashing across her face before she smoothed it away. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. Apparently not. I poured myself water and leaned against the counter, keeping a careful distance. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Outside, the street was still, the kind of stillness that only comes after midnight. This time, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. "She's asleep," Chloe said unnecessarily. "Your mom." I figured. The words hung there, heavier than they should have been. This wasn't the morning anymore. There were no errands scheduled, no daylight pretending everything was ordinary. Just the two of us, awake when we shouldn't be. "I didn't mean to make things awkward earlier," she said suddenly, eyes fixed on the table. "In the kitchen." "You didn't." She let out a small, humorless breath. "I did." I watched her fingers tighten slightly around the mug. She looked tense, like she was holding herself in place by force. For the first time since she'd arrived, she seemed unsure of where to stand. "You don't have to manage me," I said before I could stop myself. "I'm not fragile." Her gaze snapped up to mine. Something sharp crossed her expression, then softened. "I know," she said, too quickly, like she'd already rehearsed it. We sat in that truth for a moment. Then she pushed her chair back and stood, pacing once before stopping a few feet away from me, close enough now that distance felt intentional. "This situation," she began, then stopped. Tried again. "Being here, with you. It's more complicated than I expected." "I didn't ask you to simplify it," I replied. The corner of her mouth lifted despite herself. "No," she said. "You didn't." The silence that followed was different, charged, unmistakable. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Every sensible part of me told me to step back, to go upstairs, to pretend this conversation never happened. I didn't move. Neither did she. Her hand lifted slightly, then dropped. "Emily," she said, and hearing my name from her mouth felt like crossing a line all on its own. "We can't—" "I know," I said. "You don't have to finish that sentence." Her eyes searched my face, as if looking for an opening or an excuse. She didn't find one. Instead, she found honesty. "This isn't nothing," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." We stood there, suspended in a moment that demanded a decision. Finally, Chloe stepped back, the tension in her shoulders returning. "We should be careful," she said, "for her sake." "For yours too," I added. She nodded, relief and something like disappointment passing through her features. "Good night, Emily." "Good night." I watched her walk down the hall, disappear into the guest room. I stayed in the kitchen long after, aware that something irreversible had just occurred. Not an action, but an acknowledgement. Whatever we were pretending not to feel had been spoken aloud, and that made it harder to ignore. The first real closeness didn't happen because we planned it. It happened because we stopped pretending space was neutral. It was a weekday afternoon, quiet in that suspended way that only exists between obligations. My mom had gone out to help a friend. Something last minute, something vague. Chloe and I didn't comment on it. We'd learned that naming absences gave them too much power. I was in the living room, laptop open, pretending to work. Chloe moved through the house with restless energy, opening drawers she didn't need, reorganizing a stack of mail already neat. When she finally sat down on the opposite end of the couch, the distance between us felt louder than conversation. "You're tense," she said, not looking at me. "So are you." She exhaled slowly. "Fair." Minutes passed. The muted sound of traffic drifted in through the open window. The late afternoon light stretched across the floor, catching dust in the air. I shifted, adjusting my posture. Chloe mirrored the movement unconsciously. Our shoulders were closer now. Not touching. Almost. "I don't like this," she said quietly. "Which part?" "All of it." Then after a pause, "The pretending." That word landed exactly where it was meant to. "I don't think we're pretending," I said. "I think we're postponing." She turned toward me then, fully. Her expression was careful but tired, like someone who had been holding a door shut for too long. "Emily," she said, "I'm trying to do the right thing." "I know. And you're not making it easier." I met her gaze, steady. "Neither are you." The air between us shifted, thickened. Chloe's hand rested on the cushion between us, fingers splayed, as if anchoring herself. Without fully deciding to, I placed my hand there too. Not over hers, just close enough that our knuckles brushed. She froze. Neither of us pulled away. Her breath caught, barely audible. I felt it in the way her hand tightened against the fabric. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her palm upward. The invitation was silent but unmistakable. I laced my fingers through hers. It was simple, still, electric. Chloe closed her eyes for half a second, like she needed the moment contained. When she opened them again, something had shifted, resolve giving way to honesty. "This can't happen," she whispered. "I know." She didn't let go. We stayed like that longer than we should have. Hands joined, bodies angled toward each other without fully committing. It wasn't desperation. It was recognition. The kind that feels both grounding and terrifying. When she finally released me, it was slow, almost reverent. She stood up immediately, pacing once before stopping near the window. "That can't happen again," she said, more to herself than to me. I nodded. Okay. Neither of us believed it. The rest of the evening passed with an edge that made every shared glance feel dangerous. When my mom came home, cheerful and oblivious, Chloe stepped back into her role seamlessly, attentive, composed, distant again. If someone had walked in blind, they would have seen nothing unusual. But I felt the absence of her hand like a phantom weight. That night, I lay awake replaying the moment. Not the touch itself, but the way she'd offered it, the choice in it, the restraint that followed. I understood then that what we were circling wasn't reckless desire. It was something we were both actively trying not to choose, and that made it harder. We didn't talk about it beforehand. That was the rule we never stated out loud. After the moment on the couch, something settled between us. Not peace, not relief, but clarity. We were no longer guessing. We were choosing when not to choose. And that kind of restraint has a shelf life. It happened 3 nights later. My mom had gone to bed early, tired from the day, door closed, television murmuring softly behind it. The house slipped into that familiar quiet, the kind that sharpens every sound. I was brushing my teeth when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Chloe's. Slow. Hesitant. She stopped outside the bathroom. "Emily," she said, barely above a whisper. I turned off the faucet, opened the door. She stood there like she'd walked into something she couldn't turn back from. Hair loose, face bare, eyes softer than usual. For a second, neither of us spoke. "This is a bad idea," she said. "I know." That was enough. She stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind her. The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. Final. There was no rush. No urgency fueled by panic. Just closeness. Her hand found my arm, then stayed there, warm and steady. I could feel the restraint she was still trying to hold on to. "This stays between us," she said. "Yes. And we stop if—" "I know," I repeated. "If it hurts her." She searched my face, as if making sure I meant it. Then she nodded once and leaned in. The kiss was soft, careful. A question more than a statement. The kind that asks permission with every second it lasts instead of taking anything for granted. When I didn't pull back, something in her let go. Not into urgency, but into ease. Her hand settled at my waist. Mine came to rest against her cheek. It stayed slow the whole time, unhurried. The kind of kiss that doesn't need anything more to mean everything. When it ended, she didn't step away right away. We stood there a moment, still close, her breathing not quite steady. "We can't make a habit of this," she said. I almost laughed. Too late. She let out a breath that was somewhere between a sigh and a surrender. We separated carefully. She opened the door first, listened. Silence. Then she slipped down the hall toward the guest room, leaving behind the quiet she always carried with her. I stood alone in the bathroom, heart racing, aware of the line we'd crossed, and the fact that neither of us regretted it. That night I didn't sleep, not because of guilt, because I knew that what we'd done wasn't an exception. It was the beginning of something we would now have to hide.
Hi, it's Lena. If this story has already pulled you in, wait until you see what's waiting for you on my Patreon. There you'll find exclusive stories, extra scenes, and all the details that make these romances even more captivating. The link is right below. Now, let's get back to Emily and Chloe.
Secrecy has a rhythm. Once you learn it, everything else starts to organize itself around the hiding. Our encounters became infrequent enough to seem accidental, but deliberate enough to feel necessary. Never planned too far ahead. Never spoken about in daylight. A look across the room. A pause in the hallway. A door left ajar just long enough to signal possibility. We learned how to move quietly around my mom's schedule. How to read her moods. How to disappear into normalcy the moment footsteps approached. Chloe was careful. More careful than I was. She insisted on limits. Time limits. Emotional ones she pretended existed. She'd hold back like someone aware of consequences, every gesture measured, as if restraint itself were part of the closeness. And yet, every time we were alone, that control frayed just enough to remind us why we were risking this at all. The kitchen became dangerous, the narrow hallway between our rooms even more so. There was something about familiar spaces that heightened everything, the contrast between domestic normalcy and what we were feeling inside it. Her hand at my shoulder while pretending to reach for something, my fingers grazing her wrist when passing her a glass. Moments that looked innocent from the outside, but carried a private weight. At night, when the house slept, we allowed ourselves more honesty. Whispers, barely there laughter, the quiet intensity of being close without being careless. Chloe would lean her head against mine and close her eyes, like she was memorizing the moment while it was still allowed to exist. "This can't last," she'd murmur sometimes. I stopped answering that. What unsettled me wasn't the secrecy. It was how quickly it started to feel like a life. A parallel one, built in fragments and stolen minutes. I began to notice how Chloe watched my mom, protective, affectionate, unchanged. There was no cruelty in her, no malice, just division. And the longer it went on, the more impossible it felt to reconcile the two versions of her. The first real scare came on a rainy afternoon. My mom came home early, soaked, annoyed, calling out our names as she dropped her keys on the counter. Chloe and I were standing too close near the sink, caught mid-conversation, energy unmistakably charged. We separated instantly, muscle memory kicking in, but the air didn't reset fast enough. My mom paused, looking between us. "Am I interrupting something?" "No," Chloe said smoothly. Too smoothly. I grabbed a towel. She just got caught in the rain. My mom studied us for a second longer than necessary, then shrugged. "Well, dinner's going to be late. Power's flickering." She walked away. Chloe didn't breathe until she was out of sight. That night, Chloe pulled back. Not physically, but emotionally. Less closeness, more distance. She slept with her door closed, spoke carefully. I understood why, but the shift hurt more than I expected. I realized then that secrecy wasn't just about hiding from my mom. It was about what it was doing to us. And somewhere beneath everything we felt, beneath the restraint, a quiet question began to form. One neither of us had dared to ask yet. What happens when hiding stops being enough? My mom noticed before either of us wanted to admit it. Not in a dramatic way. Not with accusations or questions that demanded answers. It showed up in pauses. In the way her eyes lingered too long on ordinary moments. In how her laughter softened when Chloe entered the room, then sharpened slightly when she looked at me. At first I thought I was imagining it. Guilt has a way of projecting itself onto other people. But patterns don't lie. She started coming home earlier, sitting longer at the kitchen table, asking questions that seemed casual but weren't. "Did you two go out today? I didn't hear you come in." "You seem quiet lately, Emily." Nothing she could be confronted about. Everything that made my chest tighten. Chloe noticed, too. "You think she knows?" I asked one night, whispering from opposite sides of the hallway, doors half closed. "I think she feels something," Chloe replied. "That's worse." We stopped meeting as often. When we did, it was restrained to the point of frustration. A look held too long. Fingers brushing by mistake, feeling compressed into silence. The distance was supposed to protect us. Instead, it made everything sharper. One evening, my mom asked Chloe to help her cook. I stayed in the living room, pretending to watch something I wasn't following. Their voices drifted in from the kitchen, low and familiar. I caught fragments, shared memories, inside jokes, years I wasn't part of. It hurt more than I expected. Then my mom said my name. "Emily's been different lately," she said. Not accusing, curious. Chloe didn't answer right away. "She's figuring things out," Chloe said finally. The tone of her voice, careful, controlled, made my stomach drop. My mom hummed thoughtfully. "She's not a kid anymore." "No," Chloe agreed. "She's not." Silence followed. Heavy, loaded. That night, my mom knocked on my door. She sat on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was younger, smoothing the blanket absent-mindedly. "You okay?" she asked. "I think so." She studied my face. "If there's something you want to talk about, you know I'm here." "I know." She didn't push. That was the hardest part. She kissed my forehead and left, closing the door gently behind her. I lay awake long after, staring at the ceiling, aware that the space between what was happening and what could be said was shrinking fast. The next day, Chloe barely looked at me. Not out of coldness. Out of fear. We were running out of room, running out of silence. And whatever we were trying to protect, my mom, ourselves, the fragile balance of the house, was starting to crack under the weight of everything we weren't saying. I understood then that secrecy doesn't end when you get caught. It ends when the truth becomes too loud to keep contained, and we were dangerously close. The night everything fell apart didn't announce itself. There was no argument, no raised voices, no sense of inevitability, just a quiet evening that felt deceptively normal. My mom had gone to bed early again, tired, distracted, trusting. The television murmured behind her closed door. The house settled into its familiar stillness. Chloe and I were both awake. That had become dangerous. We met in the kitchen without saying a word, drawn there by the same restless energy we'd been trying, and failing, to suppress all week. She stood by the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. I leaned against the fridge, pretending I wasn't watching the way she paced in small, controlled movements. "This can't keep happening," she said, voice low. "You've said that before." And I meant it. So did I. The truth sat between us, heavy and unresolved. The air felt thick, charged in a way that made restraint feel almost impossible. Chloe stopped pacing and looked at me then, not guarded, not careful, just tired. "I don't know how to do this anymore," she admitted. I pushed off the fridge and stepped closer. "Then don't do it alone." That was all it took. Her hand found my waist, and mine came to rest against her jaw. The kiss that followed wasn't rushed. It was certain. The kind that comes after weeks of talking yourself out of the truth and finally running out of arguments to give. Slow, steady, real. We didn't hear the door at first. We heard the light. The sudden brightness flooded the kitchen, brutal and exposing. Chloe froze. I felt it instantly, the way her body went rigid, the way reality crashed back in all at once. My mom stood in the doorway. She didn't shout. She didn't gasp. She just stood there, eyes fixed on us, on the space between us, on the truth laid bare in front of her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Chloe stepped back sharply, as if burned. "Mary," she started. My mom raised a hand, not in anger, in disbelief. "I don't want to hear it," she said quietly. The disappointment in her voice was worse than anger would have been. It hollowed the room out. "I trusted you," she said to Chloe. Then she looked at me. "Both of you." I couldn't speak. Shame pressed down on my chest, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't how I'd imagined it ending. There were no explanations that could soften what she'd seen. "I need space," my mom said. "Both of you." Chloe nodded, eyes wet, face pale. She didn't argue, didn't reach for me. She walked past my mom without another word and disappeared down the hallway. I stayed where I was, unable to move. My mom looked at me one last time. There was pain there, confusion, a grief I hadn't known how to anticipate. "Go to bed," she said. "We'll talk tomorrow." She turned off the kitchen light and walked away. I stood alone in the dark, the echo of what we'd done ringing in my ears, knowing with brutal certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Chloe left the next morning. There was no scene, no goodbye in the hallway. No shared look that acknowledged what we were losing. I woke to the sound of a suitcase rolling across the floor and the front door closing softly, as if even departure needed to be discreet. By the time I got downstairs, the guest room was empty. Bed neatly made. No trace of her, except the quiet she left behind. My mom was already in the kitchen, staring at a mug that had gone untouched. She didn't look up when I entered. "She's gone," I said. "I know." That was it. No follow-up, no accusation, just the truth sitting between us like something fragile and sharp. The house felt larger without Chloe, but emptier too. Spaces that had once felt tense now felt hollow. I moved through my day carefully, as if any sudden motion might shatter whatever restraint my mom was holding together. We spoke only when necessary. About groceries, about schedules, about nothing that mattered. The silence was heavier than anger would have been. It gave me too much room to think. I replayed everything, every look, every choice that had led us here. I wondered if restraint would have saved us, if stopping sooner would have changed anything. But the truth I kept circling was simpler and harder to accept. I didn't regret loving Chloe. I regretted the pain it caused my mom. At night, I reached for my phone more than once. Chloe never texted. I didn't either. We had agreed without words that distance was the only respectful option left. Still, the absence felt physical, like something had been removed abruptly, leaving nerves exposed. A week passed, then another. My mom started speaking to me more, slowly, cautiously. She asked if I was eating, if I was sleeping. She didn't ask about Chloe. I didn't bring her up. We were circling the truth from opposite sides, neither of us ready to touch it directly. One evening, she finally sat across from me at the table. "This isn't what I wanted for you," she said. Her voice wasn't sharp, just tired. "I know. And it's not what I wanted for her. I know." She folded her hands together, studying them. But wanting doesn't always protect us. The admission surprised me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it wasn't rejection either. That night, alone in my room, I understood something I hadn't before. Separation doesn't end love. It just removes its shape. And without shape, love either fades or waits. I didn't know which one ours would do. All I knew was that the quiet we were living in wasn't sustainable. Something would have to give. Either my mom's silence or my own. And the longer we waited, the heavier that choice became. The conversation didn't happen all at once. It happened in pieces. It started with small gestures. My mom asking me to sit with her in the living room, choosing silence instead of distraction, letting the television stay off. She didn't look at me right away. She folded a blanket that didn't need folding. I waited. "I've been thinking," she said finally. I nodded. I had learned not to interrupt moments like that. "I was angry," she continued. "Not just because of what I saw, but because I felt left out of something important. Like the ground shifted under my feet and I didn't get a warning." "I never wanted to hurt you," I said. My voice didn't shake. I'd already spent that fear. "I know," she replied. "That's the problem." She looked at me then, really looked, not like a mother trying to protect a child, like a woman facing a truth she didn't choose. "You're not a kid," she said softly. "And Chloe didn't manipulate you. I see that now." The relief hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed. "I loved her," I said. "I still do." My mom closed her eyes briefly, as if testing the weight of that sentence. When she opened them again, there was sadness there, but also something steadier. "I loved her too," she admitted, "in a different way, but losing her hurt, and seeing you with her made that hurt sharper. I would have stepped away forever if you'd asked," I said. She shook her head slowly. "I don't want to be the reason you deny yourself a life that's true." The words settled between us, fragile and sincere. "It will take time," she added. "Trust doesn't come back all at once." "I understand." She reached across the space between us and took my hand. The gesture was simple, final in its own way. A few days later, she said Chloe's name again. Casually, carefully. "If you want to see her," my mom said, eyes fixed on her coffee, "I won't stand in the way." I didn't rush. I waited until I was sure this wasn't permission given out of guilt, but choice. When I finally called Chloe, she answered on the second ring. We met in a quiet cafe across town, neutral ground. She looked nervous when she saw me, hopeful, guarded, unmistakably real. We talked slowly, honestly, no secrecy, no urgency. "She knows," Chloe said. "I know. And she's okay?" "She's trying," I replied. "So are we." Chloe reached for my hand across the table. This time there was no fear in it, no hiding, just intention. The happiness that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, earned, built carefully, with respect and space and truth. And for the first time, love didn't feel like something we had to defend. It felt like something we were finally allowed to live. The reconciliation didn't come through words. It came through presence. A month later, my mom invited Chloe over for dinner. Not cautiously, not ceremonially. Just a simple message sent in the afternoon. "If you're free tonight, you're welcome here." No conditions attached, no explanations demanded. I didn't ask my mom if she was ready. I understood that this was her way of deciding. Chloe arrived exactly on time. No suitcase this time, just herself. She greeted my mom first, quietly, respectfully. No embrace, no distance either. Something steadier, earned. Dinner was calm, almost ordinary, and that somehow meant everything. At one point, my mom looked at Chloe and said, "I miss you." Not as an accusation, as a truth. Chloe nodded. "I miss you too." Later, when the plates were cleared and the house settled into that familiar quiet, my mom turned to me. "You don't have to hide anymore," she said. "Either of you." The permission wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That night, when Chloe reached for my hand in the living room, she didn't hesitate, and my mom didn't look away. What followed wasn't instant harmony. It was adjustment, learning new boundaries, accepting that love sometimes rearranges families instead of breaking them, that relationships don't always end when they change shape. Chloe and my mom found their footing again, not as before, but as something honest, less idealized, more real. And me? I stopped feeling like a fracture between them. I became a bridge. We didn't build a perfect life after that. We built a truthful one, with space, with respect, with time. And for the first time, love didn't feel like something taken from someone else. It felt shared.